Hey guys, welcome back. So, according to the title of this video, this is how to get a grade 9 in GCSE Maths. So the first thing I wanted to go through is exactly how you do get a grade 9. So, in the previous years, the top 10% of students would get grade 9. However, last year, it was only the top 5% of students. So you're aiming to be within the top 5% of students ideally, that way you'll definitely get a grade 9. Now, how exactly do you go about doing this? Well, the first thing that is the most important thing you can possibly know is it's all about understanding. So in your GCSEs and in every single maths exam you'll ever do, 10% of the marks have to be unseen questions. Now, this might sound a bit weird. What, do they give you a new topic? No. They give you topics you already know, but they put you in a situation that you've never been in before. These tend to be the last question or two of each exam. So if you look at kind of the last question of the 2023 paper, and you'll see that it's something very strange. Or if you look at the impossible maths questions that I've gone through on my channel, those are all unseen questions, because although you know the maths to do it, like maybe Pythagoras or trigonometry, you haven't been in that situation before and you haven't had to do it. Now, as a result, that means 10% of your marks you can't really predict, which means if you want to get in the top 5 to 10%, you need to be able to at least scrape together some marks in those questions. So, how do you do it? It's all about understanding. So when you go through past papers, don't just look at the marks and go, oh, so when it's this, you do this. No. You need to actually understand why certain steps have been taken. You should bear in mind that mark schemes are not designed to teach you how to do questions. They are just guides for examiners to find out what steps you need to take, but they're not always the best for actually learning the content. This means that you need to find someone, or perhaps even work it out yourself, to explain how or why certain steps were taken for a certain question. Some topics that are really common to have not really much understanding are things like ratios, and ratios have come up as some part of the unseen questions for the past few years. And I know that some of you have seen them. If you've done any of the 2022 or 2021 papers, you'll see that the ratios questions towards the end really screwed over a lot of people. And that brings me on to the second point. The next thing you should really do is read examiner reports. So examiner reports are really, really useful because they tell you statistics on the actual paper itself. They'll tell you how many students, as a percentage, got this question right. Where did the students tend to struggle? And if you read it, they actually explain what was supposed to be done, which means you'll then know how to avoid the common pitfalls that most people have. And if you're struggling to get that grade 8 or 9, so maybe you're hovering at a grade 7 or grade 8, almost at that grade 9, but not quite, this is where you really want to do your learning. How do you find these examiner reports? If you just go onto the website for your GCSE exam board, so for example the Edexcel exam board or the AQA one, they'll have one for every single exam series, every single paper as well. And this will really help you understand where you and other people have lost marks or could lose marks in the future. So, how do you build up understanding? Well, of course, reading the answers and making sure that you understand exactly what steps are done, yeah, sure, that's a really good way, but what if you run out of questions? Well, what I'd thoroughly recommend you do is find harder questions. Now, there's two ways to do this. One of them, you're probably going to hate me for saying, but the other one, which is the one I want to start with, is Pearson release aiming for grade 9 papers every single year. The fourth set hasn't come out just yet for 2023-2024, but it should come out soon, I'm hoping. Now, there are 3 sets of these papers. So there's 9 papers in total for aiming for grade 9s. And these are really, really useful because they are tricky questions that have a heavy emphasis on problem solving. Now, something just to point out is I've actually done all of these papers on the YouTube channel. So if you go onto the YouTube channel and just type in aiming for grade 9, you will find my full walkthroughs for every single paper, as well as the links to the paper themselves. In which case you can just try the paper yourself, and if you get stuck or if you want to mark your work, go to the video, have a look at my explanation, and there you go. You'll have a pretty solid understanding of these kind of aiming for grade 9 questions. But you should only do this assuming that you're actually fine with all of the content. Don't watch those videos or do those papers now if you're a bit weak on certain parts, because you're going to waste it. Because then you'll remember the process rather than actually understanding the process. So what I thoroughly recommend is make sure if you go on Maths Genie, you can do every single question on that website. Make sure that you're able to do it. So again, make sure that you have that thorough understanding. So the advice from my previous video, which was how I would do maths now, is go on Maths Genie, make sure you go through that, make sure you understand all the content, go on Corbett Maths to find extra questions, etc. then you need to aim for a grade 9, because that'll actually test your understanding as opposed to just your general knowledge of the methods. So again, you have those aiming for grade 9 papers that are on my channel if you're interested in looking at them, and I explain exactly how you approach each question. Now, what was the method that I said you'll probably hate me for? The next method is actually doing questions that are above your current level. Now, what's above GCSEs? A-levels, you're right. So what I'd recommend doing is actually trying to find A-level questions. Now, this might sound crazy to you because you're trying to study for GCSE, why would you do A-levels? Well, I view it kind of like weightlifting. Now, bear with me a second. If I said that, in 4 months' time you have to be able to deadlift 100 kilos, you probably wouldn't just get up to, practice with 90 kilos or 100 kilos. You'd probably try and practice. The best thing you can do is practice with like 120, so that way the 100 is really, really easy for you. If I told you to go do your year 6 SATs again, you'd probably get 100%, because you've done harder stuff since then. Even though you haven't practiced for the SATs exam, you have done harder maths than that. So, the good thing is, in year 12 A-level maths, the maths is actually fairly similar to GCSEs, but they take it up a slightly higher level. But it's not in terms of the maths that's harder, it's in terms of the understanding and the problem solving that's harder. So what you can do, bit cheeky, is go to A-level maths, and let's say you do the solving quadratics chapter, or the completing the square chapter, or the indices chapter, or the algebra chapter. You have harder questions that are more conceptually challenging that you can practice, which makes the GCSE stuff really easy. So what I will do for you is I'll put links to the A-level style questions in the description, as well as a link to the A-level textbook in the description, so that way you can just have a peruse if you're interested. But I would thoroughly recommend it. So I'll put the chapters that you can do from a GCSE perspective, I'll put the textbook there just in case you need a reference, and I'll put some links to some questions just in case you want to do that. And I'll also put links to the aiming for grade 9 questions. But again, in terms of what you need to do to get a grade 8 or 9, is you really need to focus on that understanding. Remember, you have 3 assessment objectives, AO1, 2 and 3. AO3 is really where the grade 9 is, and it's applying your kind of situations to real life and understanding and being able to interpret information. It's not just going to be, hey, you need to be able to do this, this or this. It's, I give you this situation, what would you do? Try and get the marks. So again, and the topic I would really focus on in terms of those unseen questions is geometry. So anything to do with areas, perimeters, Pythagoras, trigonometry, etc. Sine and cosine rule as well. Those tend to be the unseen questions because geometry is really easy to link to real life, and it's also very easy to make a bit more complicated, a bit more challenging. They just make the shape slightly different. There you go, new question. So again, I would focus on that. But in terms of grade 8 or 9, it's all about understanding. So the next question I normally get is, if I'm on a grade 7 or 8 and I want to get a grade 8 or 9, should I just get a tutor? Now, you need to be really careful, because with tuition, generally speaking, the most common queries that we get is, we're struggling to get kind of grades 5, 6, 7. How do I get to those? Some tutors can get you to a grade 9, but again, tuition, generally speaking, a lot of tutors focus on the lower kind of levels, so that way the people can at least pass the exam. So you need to be very selective about who you want to be your tutor. But yes, tutors can explain the maths to you if they're good, and if they're capable of doing that, they can explain it to you in a way that you'll understand, which will increase your odds of getting a grade 9. Again, there are thousands of YouTube videos that you could watch instead to help your understanding, but if you're really stuck, you can get a tutor, but make sure you're very selective. Make sure they're giving you the really kind of challenging work, and make sure they can explain things in simple ways. It's all well and good if they can explain things in a really complicated mathematical way, but can they relate it to you? Can they explain something so that you understand it? Because again, it doesn't matter if they understand it, it matters if you understand it. So those are kind of my top tips. I know that there are kind of other videos which kind of go through other tips, but I don't think they're very useful because a lot of it's just, hey, revise more, do past papers. This is more tailored to actually getting a grade 8 or 9, so it's not as much stuff, but again, just focus on the understanding and check out the links in the description to help you out with the resources, and I'll see you in the next one.